Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, one of the civic partners for this show. Today I have Sabel Bong from SUNY Canton and two SUNY Potsdam students, Griffith and Joshua Garry, with me in the studio today to talk about study abroad. Welcome, gentlemen. Sabel, you're an old friend. You've been on North Country Matters before. Sabel is the Educational Opportunity Program Counselor at SUNY Canton. Griffith is a senior at SUNY Potsdam in Sociology and Speech Communications, and Joshua Garry is a junior at SUNY Potsdam in Sociology and Psychology. So, Sabel, give us a quick sketch of the Cambodia Study Abroad course that took place over the semester break in January. What were the educational goals and who went on the trip?
Sure. We went on a 3-week course over the summer, 3-week to Cambodia. About 8 students came with us, and 1 student came from St. Lawrence University. And the trip was to study the history and culture of Cambodia, and we had an opportunity to go to some amazing places. One of the 8th wonder of the world. We went to the beach and the resort, and we went to see some of the culture. But we also studied the social ills and what poverty has in Cambodia and some of the social ills that came from it. So we had a great mix and a great opportunity to learn so much about Cambodia.
Right. Isaac, tell us a little bit about some of the non-governmental organizations, the NGO groups that your student group visited while you were in Cambodia.
Well, a few I can think of right now is EBOC and Chukdai. EBOC is Everybody's Gonna Be Okay, and they help teach hospitality to students, and Chukdai helps girls that have been affected by human trafficking.
Okay, so the EBOC people, they train in the hospitality fields. Now, why have they chosen the hospitality fields to do the training of young people in?
Well, Cambodia is very big in tourism, and hospitality is needed when it comes to tourism. So people that need to find places to work in hotels, bars, and different services like that. So definitely getting education in those kind of touristy environments.
Okay, one of the other groups, or one of the other NGOs that you actually looked at was the ProTeep project. And tell us a little bit about that one in terms of how it helps girls to ensure that they're going to finish high school.
Well, what they do is they have a little program set up where they get funding, and with that funding they can send girls to school. Uniforms, of course, are very costly, and the money that goes to the organization helps purchase uniforms and school books and other materials that deals with that process.
It's kind of interesting because First Lady Michelle Obama just came back from an overseas trip where she was focusing on education for girls, and one of the countries that she went to was Cambodia. And so there's been a lot in the media lately about what some of the conditions under which she was looking at in some of these countries. And it's interesting that in Cambodia, girls often drop out of school in order to support their brothers to continue their education. So we know that it makes a huge difference to girls when they can finish their education because they're more independent in terms of their economic ability to support themselves and their families, and they don't tend to marry as young, which also is a pretty big advantage to them in terms of going forward with their lives. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. And you mentioned a little bit about the group that addresses the human trafficking problem. What is this particular NGO doing to help people who've been involved in human trafficking?
Well, it's a lot of work that they do. For instance, there's another organization, Aguape, and what they do, they take in girls and they keep them sheltered from that kind of institution, provides a lot of education, which is necessary to get people that have been afflicted off of it. So I think education is one of those things that is very important, and also the security. So they secure the girls, keep them away from these things, and educate them, right, yeah. And educate them.
Josh, you were the student leader on this trip. How did your responsibilities differ from the students who went just as students?
Well, there was a flexible itinerary, so a lot of what I assisted Sabel with was troubleshooting where we were going to go, some of the logistics of those things, and then basically, you know, there's a lot of different opportunities and options of places to go, so if one group wanted to go here, another went there.
Oh, so you could actually
I'd lead
split up
them.
into to a couple of different groups. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Tell us a little bit about some of the cultural and historic sites that your group visited. I know one of the places on your itinerary was the Royal Palace. Tell us a little bit about that.
Honestly, Isaac would be better to tell you about the Royal Palace. I had some logistical problems and I wasn't able to go
Oh,
to that
okay.
particular place.
So tell us about the Royal Palace, Isaac.
The palace is a beautiful place. The architecture is totally different than what we're used to. There's one room with silver tiles and just, it's a beautiful place. The Royal Palace is beautiful. That's the one thing I can say about it. It's something out of my comfort zone, something I've never seen before, and just to be in the same area where Your Highness it was currently present at the time. It was a very interesting and honorable feat.
Oh, great. That sounds like a great opportunity. I'll try you again, Josh. Were you able to go to Angkor Wat and to
Yes.
Angkor Thom, because that's the ancient city
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
the temple, and those are always talked about in relationship to Cambodia as wonderful cultural icons.
Yeah, Siem Reap is a very interesting junction between the traditional Khmer culture and the Western world, whereas Phnom Penh is really kind of the urban Cambodian capital, and Sihanoukville, where we also went, is really kind of a Western tangent that is much more geared toward the Western world. So it's really very interesting to see a lot of Westerners come in and to see Angkor Thom, which is essentially the walled holy city, and it's a complex of hundreds of temples. The most infamous being Angkor Wat, which is the largest religious building in the world. But the backstory is really interesting because it's started in the 7th century and lasted until the 1400s. So there's this huge dynasty that kind of came in and just took over the entire region. And for world leaders to come back and kind of see what was is really kind of a glaring juxtaposition, as I said, because there's, the world leaders that are there touring and watching and learning the stories, and the Cambodians are teaching a story of their past and kind of this melding of empires.
Yeah, and it's something that we don't think about a lot here in the United States because our cultural history is very short by comparison to places like that where, 7,000 years is compressed into one area. And here we've got not quite, 400 years more or less from the time that it was first settled by Western peoples, but it's a very different landscape and it's a very different historical perspective on the landscape. So I'm sure that both of you and your fellow students were very touched by some of what you saw just because of the ancientness of the culture.
Absolutely.
One of the other things that you did, which was certainly not a very important historical event in the Cambodian people, but certainly not a place that has a happy history, is the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge. Tell us a little bit about how you responded to that particular location when you had a chance to go to it.
Oh, well, the killing fields, it touched me. One thing I like about getting the chance to study abroad is what you're studying. When we went to the killing field, I've never been to a place something like that, so to be there, it's kind of euphoric. You feel what these people have gone through, and just seeing things that are still present, like they had bones that were right there next to you that you can touch, and you shouldn't touch, but you can touch them, and clothes coming out of the ground. It puts you in a euphoric state, and to know this has really happened. Like, we can read in history books, we can see, learn about the Holocaust, for example, and you understand what had happened, but it's nothing like being there and seeing the physical evidence there. So that was a big one for me.
What was your impression, Josh?
It's still kind of hard to grasp the sheer numbers, the magnitude of it. Experts vary between whether 1.5 million or 3 million killed. That's the official numbers that Hun Sen says, that 3 million, which is over a quarter of the population. And it's really tough because what they did systemically with the killings was to wipe out the entire upper class, all the professionals. So there were no more lawyers, there were no more doctors. The old military institution,
Educators, they probably,
right?
Yeah.
They took out all of the higher education. So what you essentially did was sociologically knock an entire culture back to agrarian times, and I mean that's part of the other thing is that's how they killed them. They ran out of bullets and they started using hose and
Farming
ads.
equipment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Sabel, talk to us a little bit about how the current Cambodian regime looks back at this part of its history, because it wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. It certainly wasn't like the Angkor Wat, where you had hundreds and hundreds of years. This is very, very recent in the past. How is the current government handling this part of the past?
So far, it was mixed. As Hun Sen is the current prime minister, and Hun Sen used to be a former Khmer Rouge leader and who defected into Vietnam, and he came back in 1979, and Vietnam almost installed him as sort of the government leader. And so at this time now, the government is open to kind of learning about the Khmer Rouge and allowing more of an openness. For example, DC, Documentation Center Cambodia, is an organization that archives and receives documents. And what they did is they published a textbook for high school students on the issue of Khmer Rouge regime. And so it allows an openness to speak. Some of the assignments of these students is to go and interview some of their family members on how they've gone through the issue. So it's kind of amazing that this current government is allowing high school students to openly talk about this. And it really is, so at this time the current government is allowing some conversations, open, frank conversations, as a part of national reconciliation and healing. So it is amazing. However, we don't know how long that's going to last, and it could be issues where today it's open, tomorrow may not be. The time that we went, it was elections were over and it was relatively calm politically, and so we were very fortunate we went in that time. So ask us next year at this time, it might be a different answer. Yes.
Right.
So currently, so far.
Well, one of the things that is a benefit of study abroad for almost everyone who goes through it is that it takes a student outside of his or her comfort zone, and it can really change you in terms of your perspective, and it can also inspire you to think about your life in a new way and to find different ways to give back. Isaac, tell us a little bit about how this trip might have changed you in that way and inspired your goals.
Well, since coming back from Cambodia, one thing I've been researching is like how to start a nonprofit organization. We've been to so many nonprofit organizations which have sustained so far, and the benefits look amazing. Being my parents are from the Caribbean, my father being from Barbados and my mom from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I was kind of thinking of possibly doing my own nonprofit organization in the Caribbean, and I would like to work with children, including sports, education, and other different subject material to help children escape potential abuses. So that's something
So that's definitely something that came out of this trip.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Josh, you've had a lot of experience with travel and with missions. What do you see as some of the student takeaways from this study abroad experience in talking with some of the other your fellow students at SUNY Potsdam who went with you? What were some of the takeaways that you see?
Well, the majority of the group had never been out of the United States, so there was certainly levels of culture shock in general, as there would be if you went to any other country that isn't essentially North America.
Or English speaking.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
But even parts of Mexico, they're not going to experience that much culture shock. It's really, I mean, you don't have cognates when you speak Khmer. It's either English or it just does not draw any kind of connection. But authenticity, you can't replicate or come up with any other way of experiencing poverty unless you're really there. Third world poverty is very emotional. It should be life-changing to see how it affects people when you build relationships and get to know people. We stayed in one hotel for the majority of our time. We made friendships with people there. And for a lot of people, it was really the first time they see how anyone else in the entire world lives other than Americans or Canadians, like you're saying.
Right, right.
So I think it was essentially the human connection, seeing that there are a lot of common denominators despite all our differences, that they're people and they laugh and smile and have memories that we had to share together. And it was great. And I think that's a really important connection to make when you consider people around the world.
Right, right. And we do know that the world is getting smaller, certainly in terms of things like that. People now, it's not at all uncommon to have a job that has an international component to it. So those kinds of experiences as students are very important to give you that level of comfort and that degree of facility when you are going to be thrown into those situations where maybe you're with people from a different cultural background or a language background. Sabel, let's talk a little bit about the importance of experiential learning that you can get via study abroad. What are some of the effects that it has on students kind of in general in terms of your research as an EOP counselor? You see a lot of people taken out of their comfort zone and put into a different academic environment. So how does that translate with the study abroad as well?
Experiential learning is so critical. Like Isaac said, you can read something in a textbook and then really not understand until you're actually there. And so I think that for to go out into a culture, into a different culture and a different environment, it really opens up the way you see the world. And it also increases your critical thinking, because if you are looking at things from a different angle, the paradigm in which you see the world changes. And you're able to solve complex issues because you can see things from a different perspective. And as going abroad, there's more than one way to solve a problem. They may solve it differently, but they may have a different, more efficient way of doing it, or it's just different, but you get similar results, or if not better. So as an EOP counselor, I work with students that may not have the means to travel abroad, but when they do travel abroad, they see that the world in a different light, and then they're engaged to study even more. So if they're taking a math class, they don't really see any relevance to it. But if they go to a country like Cambodia and find out there's no running water, and you need to use some math to learn how to drill a well, and they can actually take that back and say, I think math is important and it will save people's lives. So having that experiential learning component to studying abroad is so critical. And if I had it my way, every student would be required to study abroad, because it would open up the way they see the world. And if they're exposed to different people, they're not as nervous of meeting different people and new people, and that gives them an advantage to look at cultural differences and not see it as an obstacle, but look at cultural differences and see it as a challenge, not as a challenge, but a way to work together and see it as strength in diversity, and not as a way to separate people. So as we see in the news nowadays, people are not. There's issues with diversity. I think one way to address that issue of diversity is being exposed to diversity through study abroad. And so it really tackles several different issues. Thus, it's so important that students should study abroad.
Just as Josh was saying about, you see the commonalities amongst people, even though they may not share the same language or the same culture, but people are people. And they have the same needs and the same desires and the same human characters. Study abroad also tends to make students better students, doesn't it? I mean, there's a real academic kind of force multiplier, isn't there, about kids who are able to go on those sorts of experiences?
Yes, anecdotally, research says that students who do study abroad have a higher graduation rate than those who don't study abroad, and a higher persistence rate. And that's an excellent issue, because now college graduates, it's fairly, there's low graduation rates for many colleges and universities. It's an issue they have to tackle. But adding this issue of this component of studying abroad may help students be motivated and inspired, like Isaac and like others in the group, to really apply their knowledge and their learning into some practical issue that can benefit a whole people and a lot of people. So combining what you learn in the textbooks with the experience of studying abroad is absolutely critical, and it's a wise investment in the child's education. So some students come to college, they don't know why they're here. They're not exactly sure. This mom and dad pushed them out the door and said, you know what, go to college. And then I talk to them. But to engage a student, let them experience by going abroad to find out, you know what, I really have a heart for these people, and I really have an issue. Maybe they learn something about the environment, and then they become activists, and they want to go to school in order to address an issue. So connecting and engaging is very, very important, and study abroad is one way of doing it.
Right. This was actually designed to be a joint SUNY Canton and SUNY Potsdam project, which unfortunately SUNY Canton students didn't actually end up being able to do. So tell us a little bit about what you have in mind for future SUNY Canton students in a study abroad type of a program.
Yes, unfortunately Dr. David Bug wasn't able to join us. He was scheduled to come, and he was very critical in everything. But we hope to offer, I hope to offer the history of Cambodia, History 385, and the fall of 2015 at SUNY Canton. We are looking to offer this class, I'm looking to offer this class to study the history, the culture, and really understand the rise of the Khmer Rouge, the fall of the Khmer Rouge, and understand just sort of what led up to some of these developments. I'm hoping to offer a study abroad in the summer of 2015. So if this course has interest, and if students in the North Country and people, anybody in the North Country is interested in learning about Cambodia, because it would provide an opportunity for them to go on the summer trip, the summer of 2015 to Cambodia.
One of the things that we know is that study abroad programs are often quite expensive, and so there is a financial barrier for students. In order to make that barrier go away, you have to be sometimes pretty creative about how you fund these programs. So talk a little bit about the need for scholarships and how we support students who may not have this opportunity because of their family situation, but need it for that personal growth and that academic growth that we've been talking about.
Yes, Cambodia, the study abroad can be very expensive, and we are looking to create a donation or a scholarship to fund to fund study abroad. So it really is important. I believe that students shouldn't be held back. And our students that did go to the Cambodia trip, they sacrificed, they worked, they did a lot of things in order to get there. But we would love to have more opportunity and help students that want to go and not have finance as a barrier for them to go. So we hope to apply or hope to raise funds for a scholarship fund at SUNY Canton and SUNY Potsdam. And if anyone's interested in donating, please contact the Study Abroad office on either campus, and then they can make a donation to help ease the burden of students who love to go. And everybody should have an opportunity to study abroad.
Isaac and Joshua, tell us a little bit. I mean, what would you say if a student walked up to you today and said, I'm thinking about taking a study abroad opportunity, why should I do that? What would the two of you tell a student about the importance of it and what you personally took away from it?
Do it, create opportunities, see something different, step out of your comfort zone, learn a lot. Like you said, the world is getting smaller, and we can take advantage of that. It'll just make everything better.
As you said, there is definitely a growing market for employment with international travel, but roughly 25% of the U.S. population is college educated, so most people won't still get to go to these places. And chances are, if they're not working in a job that gets them overseas, they're not going to get there. So, I mean, not to be cliche, but it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for most people. And if you have that chance to experience that authenticity, to make those bonds and make those connections, to potentially address and, you know, help to solve real problems in the world, then, you know, it is worth that little bit of debt or that extra hard work you have to do to get there.
And there are lots of different ways that students can take advantage of that. When you're in high school, you can be an AFS student. One of my oldest son was an AFS student to Australia for a year as a high school student. So that's one avenue. You've got avenues like this, kind of a short-term trip. We have study abroad programs that a lot of colleges run. Some colleges run a year abroad program, and it's actually built into the academic pricing of their institution, so that, you know, there's obviously additional money, but a lot of times it can be built in with financial aid and other kinds of support like that. So does SUNY Canton offer much in the way of study abroad right now, or are these just very unique kinds of situations that arise?
It kind of depends. Sometimes it depends on the financial aid package. If you go on a short-term mission, a trip like this, about 3 weeks, then there may not be as much funding in terms of the institution, but they can have funding in the terms of grants, like Pell Grant or TAP Grant, or even loans that they can take to fund these initiatives. So sometimes semester-long programs in the summer or in the fall, they might have more financial aid because it's part of their whole financial aid package. So currently, depends on what trip they go to. We would love to have bigger scholarships that will fund maybe half of the trip, and that will allow, you know, students from, you know, modest means to be able to apply and get into these you know, these institutions or to these experiences. And so SUNY Canton, SUNY Potsdam, we're state universities. So I think that having that help provides, in addition to the grants that are already there, will really make it feasible for our students. Some of them really want to go, and there had been a few students that love to go, but they were just a little bit short.
Right.
We had one student from Potsdam who really could have benefited from New York City, but could not go. He was short by a little bit, and that extra funding may have been able to get him over the top and be able to have him come with us.
Okay.
So things like that.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and obviously, yeah, you two fellows really took a lot away from your experience in Cambodia this time, and you know, I'm sure that it's going to come back for years to come, and it'll be something that you'll draw on as part of your experience, and particularly as you find ways to give back and to understand the commonality that we all have as people, regardless of where we call home. So thank you very much. Sabel, thank you for your help in putting this trip together and for bringing these two nice young gentlemen into the studio with us today. Our time is up. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters, produced here in the studios of WCKN on the campus of Clarkson University. This show is a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, and the Communication and Media Department here at Clarkson. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.